What embarrassing moment did you not stop someone from doing because you wanted to see what happened instead? I was at a convention with a friend and went to the bathroom at break time. He heads into a stall and I go to the urinal. Man walks in right behind me and heads into other stall, unseen by my friend. Now, this man had some problems. Serious noises and smell coming from his stall. And then I hear my friend say, "Dude, what the fuck, you trying to win a contest?" And he proceeds to let a huge one rip and giggle. Man, another stall does not reply and unfortunately still has his own issues. My friend says, "That all you got? Check this one out, beach." I'm crying from holding in laughter at this point as he lets another loud sheet fly. My friend thinks I'm in the other stall and we are alone in there. The other guy probably thinks he's in there with an absolute psycho. Then finally my friend, after getting no response from me, says, "Yeah boy, my sheet's so powerful it got you speechless," and he laughs. Other guy is probably terrified. At this point I start washing my hands, so my friend can simultaneously hear the faucet running and cheating still going on in the stall next to him. I say, "Hey Joe, just gonna wash up," and head back to the meeting room. Meet ya there. It was absolutely hilarious how quiet that bathroom got when the realization sunk in for him. By the time they were both done, nobody wanted to come out first. My friend joined me in the meeting room, red-faced, with a look that said seriously, "Dude, could you not have spoken up sooner?" Edit. Wow, thanks for the gold. It happened in high school, while watching our educational movie. We were two classes tucked into a small classroom to watch it together. So people had to sit on the desks as there wasn't enough chairs. I sat next to my friend's girlfriend on a desk, with my friend on a chair in front of us. She strokes her hand through his hair. He takes his hand behind his back and proceeds to stroke her leg. Only thing was, it was my leg. I poked his girlfriend to let her know what was going on. We both knew what had to be done without uttering the words. We let this go on for a good 5 minutes, constantly fighting the urge to laugh out loud. Then I slowly pulled my trouser leg up. He stroked my very furry leg for about half a second before he realized something was very wrong. I'll never forget his face when he turned around to see what was going on. This one is reversed as it was my friend laughing maniacally while it happened to me. My college roommate used to work at this chicken restaurant called Chicken Express. We would go eat at a location close to campus. This was not the location that he actually worked at, pretty often cause it's delicious. So one time he tells me, "Hey man, when you order the tenders make sure you say shibby after your order. That's the code to tell them you work at Chickeny and they'll hook you up with like 20 tenders." Maybe it was wishful thinking, or just plain stupidity, but I totally believed him. We drove through the drive-thru, and he was in the back seat. The conversation with the employee went like this. I'll have 2 number ones with mashed potatoes. Shibby okay, 2 number ones with mashed potatoes and a what was the last thing? Shibby, having trouble hearing you. A what now? Shib. By sir, I have no idea what you're trying to say. Do you wanna pull around? At which point I look back and see my friend almost turning blue from trying to hold his laughter in. He totally lost it and I just drove off. Last summer we went camping, and when I tried to use one of the campground coin operated showers I was disappointed when I put in $1 and it didn't work. As I waited for the one that did work, a guy came up behind me and said, "Hey, it looks like that shower room is vacant. Are you waiting for this one in particular?" I explained that I had tried it, but that it was out of order, so there was now 2 of us waiting for one shower room. Just minutes later a woman and 3 kids comes by, looks at us waiting in line, and makes a dash for the vacant shower room. One of the kids looked at us and quietly asks if there's a line, and she responds SHHHHHHH, and the 4 of them go in and switch the door to occupied. Maybe I'm the one who should be embarrassed by not telling her. Undressing yourself and 3 kids, inserting quarters that you'll never get back, only to have to redress everyone and sheepishly get in the line you should have been in. To begin with is probably a bit of an overkill for the crime of seeing an opportunity and taking it. Anyway, she was there in an even longer line when I got out and glared at me as I went back to my family's camping spot. It definitely made me feel less bad about allowing her to go on a comic adventure. While waiting for a briefing, a room full of Air Force airmen intentionally sat in every chair other than a damaged one they knew would dip very far back when someone sat in it. I arrived and the room was full. The anticipation was palpable. I already knew about the chair, I thought everyone did, so I sat in the only other one available, and realized the last person absent at that point was a generally disliked senior NCO, a higher up sergeant for those of who you don't know. As a junior NCO, I should have taken the initiative to inform said SNCO about the chair when he arrived, and for a second, I was going to tell him. Then I didn't after all the airmen erupted in laughter when it happened, and it took every ounce of fortitude for me not to, as well. I was definitely lol on the inside, though. I'm not proud how to read it, loloti. Many years ago, was hanging out with a bunch of friends from college, which we had all graduated from about 5 years before this story takes place. We are having dinner. It's 4 married couples, and 1 single dude. We all, including both members of all the couples, went to college together. The single guy starts talking about how he ran into this girl, Jennifer, who we all also went to college with and with whom he had had a brief fling with in college. I know that every single man at the dinner table, except me, slept with Jennifer when we were in college. I also know, or at least very strongly suspect, that the other guys are not aware of each other having slept with her, and b, none of the women are aware that all of their husbands have slept with her. So, not only do I not stop the single guy from talking about his recent encounter with her, I ask him a lot of questions. How is she? What's she doing? Does she have a boyfriend? Man, was she hot in college? Friend B, don't you also think she was hot in college? Friend C, didn't you have a few classes with her? And on. For about 10 minutes. Or, just long enough for every other dude at the table to turn beet red. Meanwhile, single guy has no idea what's going on, and is getting more and more confused about why I'm asking him questions about his old girlfriend. Only embarrassing for those with a conscience, but I used to watch people shoplift at Urban Outfitters when I worked there, and try to guess whether they'd get caught at the door or not. Normally I wouldn't just let someone steal from my place of work, but that company's an intentionally deceitful and generally unsavory enterprise. Also, I was in college and really wanted to stick it to the man. Edit. Since a lot of people are asking about what I mean about them being deceitful, here's a reply I made to the first person who asked. It's not really a story, just a collection of things. During the first Obama election it appeared they were one of his biggest supporters, but the truth is Richard Hayne, the owner, regularly contributes enormous sums of money to different extreme right-wing causes and candidates. It's just business, but as an idealistic college student I felt like they were taking advantage of Obama supporters because they were unwittingly contributing money to causes and people they didn't agree with. Another thing that bothered me was the poor quality of the clothes with the high prices. I didn't realize until I bought a few things for myself, and they almost instantly literally fell apart. I had never bought clothes that poorly made, and I was used to shopping at Walmart and the like. And of course that means sweet shops, slave labor, etc. You could see how a college student would be righteously enraged. In high school, I took Algebra 1A and 1B. Math split up into a 2-year course instead of 1. It got a lot of the lazy kids. I took it because math is harder for me. Anyway, one of the kids in the class was trying to be all cool. How he was doing it, of course, was incredibly dumb. Specifically, he was trying to be a badass by spraying breath spray up his nose. You know, the kind that you spray twice onto your tongue. It should also be stated that I was a complete and utter loser in high school. So he's trying to be all cool, spraying this stuff up his nose. I look at him and just say, Corey, you're supposed to inhale while spraying. Now that his coolness was challenged, he did it. His face turning beet red, him crying and slamming his head on the desk in pain for 15 minutes as a result, was worth it. I had a friend in college that dared people to kick him in the balls after he'd had too much to drink. We'll call him Dave. Part of his party trick was to keep a straight face the whole time. His success rate had given him a false sense of confidence, so he just kept egging people on. Keep in mind that the ball kickers were usually drunk freshmen who could barely put any power into it. Then one night, he decides to up the ante and ask one of the school athletes in attendance, we'll call him Ricky. I knew Ricky played soccer, and though I'm usually the buzzkill that asks everyone to be doubly sure they really wanna do this, I decided to let Dave go for it. Ricky, who was also completely sober, accepted the challenge. He took a deep breath, pretended like he was readying himself for kickoff, and took aim at Dave's package. What unfolded after that moment continues to pull at my heartstrings. The moment that Ricky's foot met Dave's crotch elicited a look of horror from every man in the room. Ricky had taken Dave's dare seriously, and his foot landed with so much force that it was reminiscent of the sound that a boxing glove makes on a bag, except with a tiny squish. I was a 19-year-old girl, and even I was grabbing my crotch when I heard it. Dave quietly excused himself, while Ricky apologized profusely. After Dave hadn't been seen for a while, I went looking for him, and found him lying in a ball on the bathroom floor. He had been there for about half an hour. He looked at me, and said, I think I need help. Ricky, who was still feeling guilty, was also sober, and I asked him to drive us to the hospital. They did the whole 9 yards for Dave, including an ultrasound. I waited outside the room, but I could tell that the ultrasound tech was trying to make small talk, so while he was imaging Dave's balls and shaft, I could hear him talking about a Peter Gabriel album. The doctor said that Ricky's foot hit Dave's crotch with such force that it was as if he had sustained a stab wound to his genitals. He spent the rest of the year with a banana hammock underneath his jeans. The only funny part was that, since he dressed like a generic hipster, he had to buy new pants so they would fit over it. TLDR, don't dare people to kick you in the balls. Haha. Thanksgiving happens every faking year. I watch my out of town my life is so awesome relatives turn into crumbling shapes of their former selves with every glass of wine, beer, and sip of whiskey they take. My cousin suddenly spout out last year how my other uncle used to undress her when he was 14 and she was 8. She touched his purple-headed monster. They bantered back and forth about what would normally be some kind of major crime, while my other relatives looked down at their food like nothing was being said. 2 years before that, my stepbrother got like 20 phone calls from his girlfriend while his wife sat next to him uncomfortably. That marriage didn't last. And my aunt peed herself in the kitchen by accident when she could not find the bathroom fast enough. Yes, Thanksgiving is glorious. And this time of year is my absolute favorite. EBIT, clarity. So in college I became friends with this girl, who was kind of a world traveler, right when I transferred in. She was a part of the international group that welcomed all of the international students, and shortly after invited me to a party for all the international students. I'm meeting lots of new people, and there is a really stunning girl from Italy that I was interested in talking to. My friend encouraged me to go open with Bella figure when talking with her. Beautiful girl was the meaning. It had Bella in it, so I thought, what the hell. I make my way to her, introduce myself, and say those magical words. The beautiful Italian girl gave me the most repulsed look and walked away. I turn around, and my friend is laughing hysterically. It translates to, you have a beautiful bussy. A friend of mine in college had a long distance relationship, 5-hour drive. He always spoke to his girlfriend and told her lies about going out and what time he got to his apartment, etc. Even though I believe he genuinely loved her and cared for her a lot, he cheated on her whenever he had an opportunity. One day at a party where he wasn't supposed to be, there was this girl mutual friend of us with a brand new Canon camera taking pictures of everything. That night he was making out with a girl while a little drunk and got in the frame of the pictures 2 times in the background. During the night this dude talks to the girl and convinces her to erase any picture that had him in it. All 3 of us sit together and start erasing pictures of him. I spot one of the pictures where he is in the background making out and stay quiet. The next day his girlfriend logs into FB and spots 2 pictures where he is making out in the background with another girl and end their relationship. I broke a bro code, and I'm not proud, but fuck people who cheat. My wife and I decided to hang out with some friends one night, and we noticed a new guy joined the group. He seemed nice, but a little off. Turned out to be a total stalker who always carried a backpack. We nicknamed it the rape kit. Anyways, we were playing some games and this guy manages to cut his hand wide open. Since no one really knows a guy, I offer to take him to the hospital. My wife and I jump in the car, and I let him sit in the front seat. He seems super happy about my wife riding along with us, and starts chatting with her. I keep peeking in the mirror realizing he's total interested in my wife and my wife is trying to keep a straight face. She lets him flirt trying to be nice and not embarrass him as I drive in silence until we get to the hospital. He hops out and is trying to make plans with my wife to go out to dinner or a movie and she's dropping hints like flashing her ring and telling him she's busy. Finally he's like, fine, if you don't want to go out, just say so. I laugh and tell him I don't let my wife go out on dates without me. He got beet red and told us he'd find his own way home. I think I enjoyed watching the boost of confidence it gave my wife the most. I can tell her she's amazing all the time, but stuff like that is proof. My friends and I were outside near some picnic tables at night. There were 4 of us, including me, 2 guys, and 2 girls. Well, our one guy friend, let's call him guy 1, thought it was a dandy idea to close his eyes and wander around and see if he could feel his way around. Meanwhile, our other guy friend, guy 2, is laying on his back on the picnic table. Guy 1 approaches the picnic table and as my girlfriend and I watched in slow motion, just places his hand right on guy 2's dick. Guy 2 is chill about it, just goes, "I mate, that's my dick." And guy 1 is super embarrassed. One of us could have said something, but we wanted it to happen. Guy 1 knows my Reddit username, so if he sees this, I'm faked. Update, he just saw it. I think he's commenting now. He says hi. Not long ago I spent 9 months on an aircraft carrier for deployment. About 6 months in the days were all looking the same, so anything for a laugh was welcome. One afternoon I visited a bathroom near my workstation to find a friend, and the walls and ceiling dripping wet. He said the toilet had exploded in his face when he flushed it. Now, it's not uncommon for pipes to break, and I had a small chuckle at his misfortune. It wouldn't even have been memorable had it ended there. A while later I returned, trying to stay hydrated, and someone was in the stall mopping the place up. Again, nothing memorable. I take care of my business and leave, but think, wow, they fixed that quickly. Back again, after a quick drain I'm washing my hands, and see someone I don't really know enter the stall in question through the mirror. At this point it dawns on me the average repair time for issues like this is usually weeks, not hours. I expected to see tape labeling the stall secured, but here was this guy, taking a leak in a mop dry stall. The thought to warn him crosses my mind, but I just have to know. I need this. I take a step to my left as the trickle stops. The metal clink of the handle is immediately followed by the rush of a fire hose at full blast. Water sprays clear out onto the mirror I had been looking through, against the stall walls and pounds against the ceiling. When the blast ends, and the bottom of the stall looks like waterfall, I hear soggy boots slowly turn around with a squishy slosh, and out steps a dripping Marine in a drenched uniform. We exchanged surprised glances as I suppress my laughter. To break the silence he says, "Well, that's soaked," and slowly sloshed out of the bathroom. Could have stopped it, but it made my day/week/month/deployment. Without the lack of trying, one of my friends was super convinced this girl he was talking to online was into him. Said she was from Ghana and even sent pics and blurry vids of herself, but made lame as excuses why she can't do a live video chat or phone call. Spent hundreds if not thousands of money to send to her back her mom was sick, rent money, etc. Yes, it's one of those dating scams. She found him on Yahoo Messenger. Anyway, even with evidence that she was some dude from NorCal scamming him for false hopes of romance, he still wouldn't budge and even had the gall to call me a jealous hater. Left him alone until his pretty much was losing money every week. His friends made fun of him, to this day, of his stupidity. The only reason he finally gave up other than being broke was when me and his friends sent him a screenshot of her chatting up other men who posted their scam stories online. Same photos and name used. He confronted the girl, which she gave a sob story that she was hacked on. Believe your friends, my love, etc. He still actually believed her for another week before getting convinced he was conned. My then girlfriend wanted to walk into the Great Salt Lake. I told her it wasn't sand on the shore but mud, deep sloppy mud. She didn't care what I thought. She thought I was an idiot, so I sat back and watched. She stepped off a rock and sank in the stinkiest mud that exists. She wallowed around to find her shoes, then retreated to the rock. Smelled so bad. She made it to a bathroom and washed herself off. Had to throw the shoes away. Couldn't get the smell out. Dumb. I'm still laughing. Happened here. There was water there then. https://www.google.com/maps/edit. She did get me back a year later. She was standing by a pond looking at a log when I walked up to her. She said, "That's a fish." I looked at this log that was a couple feet long floating motionless just off the bank in this little pond and say, "There's no way that's a fish. It's a log. Way too big for a fish." We make our way to the edge of the water with a little stick to poke this log. Whoosh, the giant fish takes off. I screamed, jumped up, tried to pull my girlfriend, who was not scared, back from the edge, which landed me on my butt in the muck. She was doubled over laughing at me. "I told you it was a fish," she said. "Biggest stupid log-shaped stupid fish I've ever seen." Back in high school, a friend of mine was planning to ask another friend to prom during theater rehearsal. Her character was supposed to read a note during a scene and he wanted to write prom. Look left on it to reveal himself with a bouquet of flowers. Sadly, she'd been asked by 3 guys and already planned to go with one. Everybody knew this but him, but we all wanted to see what was gonna happen. So the scene starts. She looks at the note and doesn't dare look to the left. She was visibly uncomfortable because she knew who wrote it and didn't want to hurt his feelings. Needless to say, he got bummed in his car after practice, and when he drove away, he was too distracted with his feelings and lightly crashed his nice car to the principal's old sedan. The principal's car made it out with just a couple scratches. He's got wrecked. Perhaps we should have said something. Edit. Note, it has come to my attention that getting bummed in Britain means to get butt faked. In America, it just means to get depressed/saddened. Teacher in class reading the review questions from the end of the textbook chapter. One guy was sort of falling asleep on left side of the room. The teacher loved calling on people he knew weren't paying attention. So he calls on him to answer. I don't remember what the question was. The guy jumps up in his seat and mumbles to his friend sitting behind him asking what the answer is, since he obviously didn't even hear the question. Without hesitation his friend whispers, "Answer is B, clitoris." And as fast as he can he yells out B, clitoris. And once he realizes what he just said sinks lower in his chair than I thought possible and turns fire engine red, all while swearing at his friend behind him. I laughed so hard I cried. The teacher just looked at him and pretended he didn't hear his answer and asked him to give it again. Which he obviously by then figured out what the actual multiple choice options were and gave one of those. We knew his friend was going to give him the wrong answer and man am I glad everyone let it happen. Was drinking in a cheap dive bar, music was playing, and there was a drunk guy dancing around by himself in the dance floor area. Through sheer harmless drunken charm, he enticed a woman to come dance with him. As they were dancing, drunk guy's pants just fall down of their own volition, all the way to his ankles. No underwear. He just keeps dancing. She doesn't notice. I drink my beer and wait. Suddenly, she notices and gets this strange deer in the headlights look on her face as she struggles to comprehend what the fuck is going on. She yells an obscenity at him, shoves him in the chest, and storms off to the bartender. He looks at me with a sheepish grin, pulls his pants up, and just keeps on dancing. So I dated a girl off and on from middle school up until we were in our mid-20s. I made a lot of mistakes with her and really just stuck around because I have low self-esteem. At any rate, about our 3rd time around, we broke up and she was pregnant within a month courtesy of the meth head she liked to date when she wasn't dating me. I thought the kid was mine. My mom thought the kid was mine. I'm pretty sure that her family was hoping the kid was mine. It wasn't. When it spawned, it had the same faked up look about it as the half-wit she was faking. Fast forward a couple of years, and we are still apart. I'm working a new job, and, rather unfortunately, I work with one of her former co-workers. I don't like the lady, but she's there and knows me. We have the usual chit chat during downtime. She asks me about the ex and her kid, and, since I'm still cordial with her, I'll let her know what I know about them, always with the caveat that I never see either of them. She brings it up all of the time, but I just figure that she's old and doesn't know what else to talk about. A couple of months into this routine, I have to pull a night shift with a coworker whom I'm much more comfortable with. It was a slow night, so we had a lot of time to shoot the sheet. Towards closing time, though, it got totally dead, and we were ahead of schedule, basically just holding the walls up until the store closed. So what's going on with you and your kid? Huh? Mickey said you had a kid that you didn't want anything to do with, and that you're basically a deadbeat dad. I don't have a faking child. She said she knew you and the mom. Oh fuck. She thinks the bastard is mine. You really don't have a kid? No, the girl I was with a couple of years ago got knocked up by a meth head the week after we broke up. Really? You better do something about it then. She's telling everyone. I ain't doing shit. I'll let the old beach bury herself. And I did. It was a fun game. I never indicated that she was wrong or that I knew she was talking about me behind my back. I kept up the conversation, being truthful because, I was telling the truth. She confronted my mom, who shopped at the store I was employed at, in the best way possible. When my mom played along with my game, the woman told everyone that I didn't even tell my mother that I had a child. For 2 faking years I kept this up. Then, a bad decision led me to get back with my ex. We kicked back up pretty heavy, and were basically living together, along with the kid. Now, when Mickey asked, I had something to say. We took him to the zoo. He's struggling with the potty chair. We're thinking about taking him on a trip. Fatherly stuff because, well, I was about the closest thing to a father he had. She was happy. Obviously, she thought I had turned my life around. I was no longer a deadbeat. Then, it faking ended. I drove through a snowstorm and was going to buy her a ring the next day, and she broke it off with me. I took it hard. It was obvious that I was taking it hard. After a week or two, Mickey and I found ourselves once again in the break room. Are you still going to be seeing him? No. I think that would be bad for both of us. Isn't he your son? No. I thought. No, I'm sterile. I can't even have kids. Why didn't you tell me? Because you didn't ask. Mickey buried herself. Nobody else really knew it went down, but I know that moment was crushing. I could see it in her eyes. She knew she gave me a bad reputation because of a bad assumption on her part. This was at a bus station. This man had a trolley/cart absolutely packed with baggage. This was in an area without trolleys, so I don't know how he found it, and I'm guessing they only found one, and that's why they put all of their bags on one trolley. I say they, because the others will join the story later. So this trolley is packed with bags weighing up to 500 kilograms, 1100 pounds of total weight. This man was around 50 kilograms, 110 pounds, soaking wet. Since trolleys aren't really allowed in this area, there wasn't really any posts or stuff like that to prevent trolleys from entering places where they shouldn't be. This group is looking for a lift, but can't find one, so the man with the bags decides to take the escalator. His friends/family are still looking for a lift when he slowly approaches the escalator. This is where I'm thinking I should probably warn him, and this is also where I don't do anything but watch. As he's pushing the trolley down towards the escalator, he leans back to compensate for the weight. He holds it for quite some time, but a small drop or something turns the whole thing into a catapult and tosses him over the bags and flying down the escalator. I jog over and press the emergency stop and just leave, since I felt like it was my fault. Part of it was embarrassing for the hero of our story, but I guess the biggest part was pain. This is kind of a long one, and honestly my first real comment, but it was probably one of the funniest things I've ever witnessed, and thought everyone would enjoy it. What you need to know about the victim is that he is a really good kid, but he is also one of those kinds of people who always has a story to one-up yours, and never hesitates to show off whenever possible. I've worked at a ski hill for quite a while and mostly worked in the terrain park building, testing, and maintaining features. In order to be able to open up a new feature, the park crew has to hit it and then sign off on it. The most important thing, as any park rider should know, is that you look before you leap and always start off easy to gauge what you're capable of doing on said feature. We had just put the finishing touches on a decently good sized jump, somewhere around 45 to 50 feet from Taki after landing. Our manager and assistant manager had already hit the jump, straight air, no problem, and deemed it safe for the public. We were recording the jumps for marketing purposes, and at this point another employee, and good park rider at that, says that their first hit off this jump is going to be a backside 180. Oh god no. We immediately remind this guy of how smart it is to test any new feature. For jumps, just straight air it the first time. Backside it the second time. But said guy points out that we are filming, and if he was going to be on film, he wasn't going to be a bitch about it. Welp, we tried, and at least if anything went wrong, it was all on film in case he needed it later for evidence. He proceeds to hit the jump with too much speed, over-rotate, and lands on his as crooked. One cheek went one way, while one went the other. Well, he looks uncomfortable, but laughs it off, while we call him an idiot, and laugh with him. Well, this was at the end of the day, and at this time we had to go up to Sweep, where the employees work with ski patrol, to ride the whole mountain, to make sure all the customers are safely off the mountain. We ride up to the top of the mountain and head into ski patrol, to wait for the first lift to close, so we can start the process, and it's about this time that we start to smell something awful. It's at this point that the victim puts his hand down the back of his pants and pulls out 2 fingers covered in both sheet and blood, and so starts the sheet show. He freaks out, rightfully so, and starts running around brandishing his bloody poopy fingers at all of us screaming, "I tore my pooper, I tore my pooper." Of course, being his good friends, we immediately start howling with laughter. In a panic, he says that he can no longer do Sweep, and that he has to go down to the main ski patrol, so they can look at his butthole. Through our aching sides and sore throats, we manage to agree with him, but tell him that he has to report this to our main boss first, who conveniently came up the mountain at this time, to finish giving us no bike lesson to another employee and his dad. We all watch as he waddles over to the top of the chair, still brandishing stink fingers, to talk to our boss. He was our boss, but we are all really good friends, so we all watch as this situation gets even better. We watch as he gets to our boss and tells him about his torn pooper. The look of disgust and incredulousness that crossed our boss's face was amazing. Our boss looks our way for confirmation that this was really happening, so, crying at this point, we all give him a thumbs up. He shakes his head, amazed but not surprised, and lets the victim go to ski patrol, and then has to wait 10 minutes while the people he was giving the bike lesson to get their sheet together. He didn't end up filing an accident report, his call, but he did end up going to the doctor. The next day he was already back at work and we asked him how he was doing. He solemnly told us that it really wasn't that bad, but aside from some disinfecting, the doctor refused to glue it for him, on the off chance he glued his ass together. And with this, a legend was born. He always said he wanted to be known for something. He had always just hoped it was for something a little cooler. The kid is a great sport about it though, and laughs with us to this day about how it all went down. He actually started being a voice of reason when it comes to some of the stuff we all do, telling us that anyone, at any time, can tear their pooper. Words to live by. There was a closed gas station / empty lot near my old apartment in Chicago, and people used to park there to run to the Starbucks across the street, despite signs saying your car could be towed. I don't think anyone got towed for the first week or so after the gas station closed, but one day I saw 3 or 4 cars get hauled off in quick succession. I realized the tow truck drivers were watching around the corner, and then when someone left their car there, they would zoom and hock the car in 10 seconds flat. A few days later I was standing outside the Starbucks waiting for my wife inside, and I noticed a lady park in the lot and cross the street towards me. I could actually see where the tow truck was, so he could certainly see her car. I figured I'd let her know, and before I could finish saying "excuse me miss," She touched her Bluetooth earpiece and said sorry I don't have anything, patted her pockets to me, and walked inside the Starbucks. About 20 seconds later the tow truck pulled up and hooked her car. About 25 seconds later she was yelling like a maniac and chasing it down the street in high heels. It probably cost her $175 and being late to work, but I don't feel bad at all for not trying to tell her again. A friend of ours, we'll say Dave, had noticed our friend Rick's dog always stopped at the edge of the yard. Naturally that seems odd as there is no physical barrier there. He couldn't quite figure out why. We explained to him that the dog was trained with a shock collar, so it was afraid to walk beyond a certain point. He goes on the spiel about how inhumane it is and how we shouldn't do things to our pets we wouldn't do ourselves. He asked if we even knew the extent to which it hurt. We said nope. It got quiet. We all felt something strange in the air and felt like we knew where this was going. He asked where the collar was and we knew. No one sought to dissuade him. He said he simply wanted to inspect it, but we figured if we played our cards right, something beautiful would happen. After a thorough inspection and about 30 seconds of staring off into the distance he asked if the boundary was still active. It was. So he snapped the collar on and said he wanted to give it a go. We figured he'd slowly creep up to the border and receive a light shock. This madman runs straight for the edge of the yard at a solid sprint, hits the boundary and suddenly backflips and lands flat on his face. To the ignorant observer it looked like he'd been clotheslined. He got up, insisted it was surprising, but not extremely painful. Rick looked down and asked if he was sure. His lower half was completely urine soaked. We were like 18 or 19 when this happened. We found out later Dave's dad had been watching from the living room and drinking a beer. He'd watched the whole thing unfold and said it was possibly the best thing he'd seen in months. I think we still have the video lying around somewhere. Edit. Hitting up Rick on Facebook to see if I can track down a copy of the video. We'll drop if he has it. Okay, technically my husband that did the watching, or should I say listening. Years ago when we were dating there was an incident. It was the first time that my husband was going to introduce me to his father and stepmother. Well, to start off they had insanely high standards. They were not pleased about meeting me. The only girl good enough for him in their eyes was a rich 6 feet tall blonde woman with Barbie measurements. I have brown hair, it was probably pink or black at the time, dressed a bit goth/punk, who didn't have that phase in the 90s zeros. Average height. They also lived in the rich part of town and had a good amount of money. My family was just average and I drove a junker car, so not what they were wanting. For him, the dinner was scheduled about 2 weeks out and I figured I would just be as pleasant as possible and hope for the best. Well, you guessed it, I got the stomach flu a few days before and it was bad. His parents were not open to a new dinner date. They just thought I was trying to get out of it. My husband tried so hard to explain that I was sick, but they weren't having it and they were getting kinda mad about it. So I told myself, you've been sick a few days already, the worst has surely passed, so muscle up buttercup, it will only be a few hours, you can do this. So we get to his parents' house and it's awkward. They give me a tour of the house and make small talk. They leave me in a room alone at one point and I can hear them telling my husband that I don't look sick at all. Oh, the wonders of MacUp, and oh how they would shortly learn their assumption to not be true. So dinner is almost ready. We are sitting at the table and then it hits. We have all had that gut-wrenching feeling like a lead plunger has just dropped from your stomach into your gut and you only hope that you can find a toilet before your bowels give way. I excused myself and power walked to the closest bathroom to unleash fury. Now is where the real fun begins. I'm in there a while, can't even count the courtesy flushes. Every time I try to leave, my stomach just ain't having it. The whole time I'm trying to just not to think about how my absence is making the dinner more awkward. Then the stepmom comes outside the door, knocks, and says, "Sweetie, are you alright?" Oh no, really not. Now I'm even more on edge. I muster out, "I'll be out in just a minute." Ugh. I finally find the strength to leave my porcelain throne. I head to the dining room. I see the food on the table getting cold. I see my husband giving me a smirking look like he is trying not to bust out laughing. And then I smell it. The stench is so immense it can't be put into words. Basically the bathroom I chose was right on the other side of the kitchen. and the fan or vent from the bathroom went directly into the kitchen and dining room. On top of the stench, apparently you could hear every plunk splat, or whatever else you want to call it. I put on a concert for my future in-laws that they would never forget. So my husband knew this about the bathroom and didn't tell me, nor did he come outside the door to encourage me to move to a more discreet bathroom. He thought it was hilarious and was loving watching his parents' reactions. In the moment I was very embarrassed and wanted to die, but I made it through dinner somehow. After the dinner, they totally said, "Well, she seems nice," in a super condescending tone. Oh well, TLDR, had a dinner date to meet my future husband's snobby parents that hated me. I got the stomach flu and ended up unleashing unholy fury in their bathroom, and the vent was attached to the kitchen/dining area. It sounded and smelled terrible. Bonus, no one really wanted to talk over dinner. I had a teacher in high school who insisted on coming up with nicknames for people based on food. One day he decided I was turkey fritter. I hated this nickname and asked him several times to not call me that. Anyways, I was in the bathroom washing my hands, and one of my friends who thought he was clever left right as this teacher entered the bathroom. I knew my friend was waiting outside the bathroom with his foot against the door so that I would walk into the door. When I tried to leave, I start washing my hands and the teacher goes, "What's up, turkey fritter?" And I politely ask him to not call me that again. He starts washing his hands and goes, "Sure, no problem." I start walking towards the door and I hear him snicker and go, "Bye, turkey fritter." I stop and pretend to start tying my shoe. He finishes washing his hands and proudly walks past me and face first into the door, turning bright red as his emotions change from shock to angry. My friend realizes what happened and runs down the hall with the teacher hot on his trail yelling, "Saturday detention." I was working at the movie theaters as an usher when I was 16. It was my first job and I was only 3 months in. The movie ends and me and 2 other ushers start sweeping and cleaning up the trash. They were cleaning the upper section and I was cleaning the lower section that was right by the hallway ramp that led into the theater. Theater is now completely empty and it's very quiet, and both ushers suddenly start talking major shit about our manager. She's such a bitch, she doesn't know what she's doing, etc. Suddenly, I hear the hallway door open and here she comes. From where she's at, she can't hear what's being said because she's too far, and the ushers up top can't see her because the lower wall is blocking the hallway. But I can see everything that's about to go down. I totally had the opportunity to grab the usher's attention, to give them a heads up, but this was too good to be true. She comes around the corner and just stands there, but both ushers had their heads down and just kept sweeping away and talking shit. She's got her tongue so far up his ass. I bet she's horrible in bed. This goes on for a solid minute and I'm just enjoying the show. Finally, she chimes in and says, "Maybe if you were better at sweeping than running your mouth you'd be done sooner." Usher goes, "Oh my god, please fire me right now." And she goes, "Oh, I am, but after you're finished cleaning this theater." It was awkwardly uncomfortable being in the middle of it, but I caught myself with this huge smile on my face, like I was enjoying it a little too much. Over a decade ago, I'm not proud of myself, was dating a guy who lived in the middle of nowhere in a house right next to his dad's house. The 2 houses were actually connected by a screened-in porch. Late one winter morning I woke up and decided to get something from the kitchen, which was next to the connecting porch. His dad and about 5 other gentlemen were outside, having just come in from deer hunting. I went back to the bedroom to find my boyfriend awake. He had a habit of sleeping nude and was indeed naked that morning. He jumped up and said he needed to grab something out of his truck. As he went to leave the room I tried to tell him that his dad and friends were back from hunting, but he told me to stop whining and he'd be right back. Sure enough, 30 seconds later he walks back into the room, red-faced, and starts looking for something to put on. His dad and friends called him Turtle for the rest of the time we dated. The embarrassing moment is currently ongoing. A couple I've known since high school is currently mid-divorce, late 30s. I'm Facebook friends with both of them. There is much debate as to whose fault the divorce is, but no one has been accused of cheating. They announced plans for divorce in August or September, and were both dating other people by October, despite living in the same home. It made me feel very bad for their 2 sons who are in middle and high school. Anyway, despite dating other people, they did not actually file for divorce until December. I assume this was due to the cost of filing. The husband has gone to great effort to make Facebook comments and air dirty laundry, and all the drama lovers are quick to run to him with any bit of gossip. This has resulted in the wife and her new boyfriend repeatedly posting that people need to mind their own business. About a month ago, or a little more, the boyfriend posted an ultrasound photo and the wife announced she is, in fact, pregnant. This was met by comments on the husband's Facebook page and the usual complaint that people need to mind their own faking business on the wife's page. Now here's where it gets really interesting. We live in Wisconsin. There is a 6-month wait after filing until you can get divorced. Also, the last I read up on it, you cannot get divorced in Wisco if you are currently pregnant. You are required to wait until after the birth, put your spouse's name on the birth certificate as the other parent, and then deal with the aftermath later in court. It appears neither of them are aware of this fact. I thought about emailing the wife to tell her. After all, I've been going to her childhood birthday party since I was in kindergarten, but I've lost track of the number of times she has announced people need to mind their own faking business. Plus, it's not like her knowledge of it would change anything. So I'm just going to see what happens. P.S. Based on the due date, it appears she conceived the baby while she was still living at home with him. They were emotionally separated and both dating other people, but somehow it still makes the whole thing just a little more trashy. I had a guy, let's call him Bill, who worked for me in the Marines. He was an officer, and I was his supervisor. He felt a staff non-commissioned officer, we will call Fred, who worked in an adjacent section, was undermining him. What actually was happening was Bill was not respected by his own Marine, so to get work done they'd purposefully avoid him. Well, multiple times Bill told me he is going to go to Fred's boss to bring him up on charges of disrespect. I told him he didn't have any proof. Bill explains to me it's his right, which as an officer it is. I explained that Fred had a good reputation and that Fred's supervisor would fight any charge, and without proof it would not move forward. I also knew that our executive officer hated Bill and was looking for a reason to send him elsewhere in the command. After several meetings where Bill insisted, I finally told him, look, you can do a charge sheet and deliver it to Fred's supervisor, but I and my boss would not support him and would disavow the charges as unfounded and without merit, but it was his right if that's what he chose to do. He wrote up the charges and delivered them to Fred's supervisor. Fred's supervisor called Bill every name in the book and they both walked into the ZO's office. The ZO called me in where I reiterated that they were unfounded and without proof, and I advised against writing them. Of course Bill got pissed at me for not supporting him on something I told him not to do. 48 hours later Bill was reassigned to a job that was not as good as ours. Fred was given an award at the end of his tour as a job well done. It was very deserved too. This story kinda fits here. I used to drive a small stretch of highway to get to work almost daily. There was one section of the road where there was an overpass and a grassy hill before it, obstructing the view of the people driving on the highway. A cop would sit behind the hill 100% of the time waiting for speeders, and I mean 100% of the time. The only times I didn't see a cop waiting there would mean I would see someone being pulled over about 50 feet up the road. The highway was 2 lanes, and I would drive in the left lane doing about 70 to 75 miles per hour until I got to that point where I would slow down to 55 to 60 miles per hour, pass the cop, and speed up again. I would usually stay in the fast lane while approaching the speed trap. Sometimes people behind me would get mad when I slowed down, but I figured in 10 seconds they would see the cop and be happy that I made them slow down. One time though I slowed down and this guy behind me got real pissed. He tailgated me closer than anyone should, laid on the horn, and I could see him yelling and flipping me off. Now maybe I should have been a bit more understanding. I mean, I get it. It sucks when people drive the speed limit in the fast lane, but this guy was being an incredible ass. So I waited about 3 more seconds until we were closer to where the cop was, and I moved into the right lane. As expected, he immediately sped up and flipped me off as he passed me. I felt kinda bad, but also kind of indicated as he passed the cop and was immediately pulled over. Okay, I posted this on another thread, but it's just too good. Also, I guess I technically couldn't have stopped this guy, but someone could have. We had a giant quarterly all-staff meeting at my work last week. The kind of meeting where there were about 200 of us in the auditorium and a few hundred more Skyping or calling in. So we are all filing into the auditorium a few minutes before it starts, and the first slides of the PowerPoint presentation are up on the projector screens at the front of the room. Suddenly, as I'm getting my coffee and muffin from the back of the room, a murmur moves through the crowd and everyone starts staring up at the screen. Some poor guy had Skyped into the meeting, and he must have not known he was sharing his screen, and that his camera was on. Because he was just kind of staring off, and picking his nose. Like, knuckle deep, really just going for it. For at least 30 seconds. Everyone kind of gaped at it, and then we all started laughing. Someone else must have eventually recognized him and tipped him off, because after a little while he suddenly stopped and got this oh shit look on his face, and then the screen went back to the PowerPoint. Funniest thing I have seen in a long time. So there was one time my dad, my handicapped brother and I went to this park that had this really cool mountain bike trial. Keep in mind I said mountain bike. My dad and I were on bikes, and my brother was in one of these. It worked surprisingly well, until we got quite high up, and my dad had to answer his phone. While he's chatting away, my brother sees this absolutely horrendous trail leading down. In all honesty, I don't think it was a trail. There was faking roots and rocks everywhere. So my brother, who thinks he's funny, starts edging his way towards the trail when the brakes on his scooter locks up and sent him straight down the trail and into a tree. From the top, all I seen was my brother hunched over the handlebars, and the seat was pushed forwards. I quickly made my way down there while screaming, "Dad, help." I push back on the seat and pull him off of the handlebars to see he was laughing so hard he couldn't breathe. I didn't have time to stop him because he didn't even get to say he was joking before he flew down the trail. But every time I think about it, I lose my shit. Didn't stop my friend from climbing into the ceiling. Our school has those types of ceilings where it's panels that pop up easily for maintenance, and the higher grade part of the school is in mod spaces. Our grades don't have our own building yet. Each room in the mod spaces have their own bathroom, so my friend had the idea, if going to the bathroom and climbing into the ceiling, he'd then crawl into the part of the classroom that's above the ceiling just to see what happens. Spoiler alert, the madman did it. Me and my friend were just in math class, doing homework, talking about PCs, typical stuff we are into, until we hear talking from the ceiling. We realize who it is instantly as he told us what he'll say while in the ceiling only place where the commas can't get me. But apparently those panel ceilings don't support weight well. He fell through the ceiling, people either shocked or laughing like hell. A teacher tried to escort him to the office to suspend him. Can't tell how long the suspension was, but all I can say is it's probably long because of damage to public property. Can't imagine friends' parents not being embarrassed from realizing my friends need to hide in ceilings from commies, cause them to pay damages. TLDR equals friend of mine climbed into ceiling, said some dumb crap while up there, only to make the fascinating discovery that ceiling panels have the strength of paper. Edit equals added 2 extra lines and removed 1 line and better context. I was in a military training course several years ago. It was a tough course where the cadre would smoke the crap out of you for anything. So anyway, these military photographers show up to take photos of us during the course. And one gets out, female, and she's really cute. Odd to see in the military, so they stand out when they do show up anywhere in uniform. Lol. So anyway, we had a couple of dumb kids talking this girl up about how hot she was and whatnot. A few of us knew better for some reason and just let the knuckleheads go on and on about her. Then the second in charge cadre walks up and joins in with these clowns. Now mind, there were several cadre running he course and any of them could smoke you at any time. And one was Noah's Sergeant West. Dude was a faking animal and had his own smoke sessions that were the worst. Mainly because he would fuck with your head while he smoked you. So anyway, the second in charge is going on and one with these clowns about this girl. asking questions about what they thought of her. He egging them on, they flat point her out that one. They say. He goes that one, turns around and says, oh really, that's Sergeant West's wife. You could have heard a faking pin drop. These clowns see their life flash before their eyes, but so did we. We blasted these faking idiots for like 2 hours while we are on the range shooting. Anyway, the day goes on. No Sergeant West and no smoke sessions to be had all day. So we are thinking we are good. Sergeant West must be out for the day. We get back to the schoolhouse lawn, right outside the main door in formation. We are waiting for instructions for the following day and clearance to be released to the barracks. Blam. The faking door is drop kicked open by Sergeant West. He comes flying out of there like faking Randy Savage. Looked like him too. Oh, I all thought my wife was hot, did you? Nobody said a faking word. No one made eye contact. Dude proceed to con the two fuckheads talking sheet and rips them each a new one. They must have had a pound of spit dripping from their face. Honestly, it was hard not to laugh about it. Then someone did. He smoked all us for nearly 2 hours. Not a single piece of my body wasn't aching or covered in dirt. She came back about 2 weeks later near our graduation to take more photos. The only thing you heard when she walked up was the birds in the trees. Hell, no one even said hello. Then Sergeant West says, what, you can't say hello to my wife? In unison we all said hello ma'am, without looking directly at her. At a multi-band concert with an old girlfriend, where we got caught smoking the nugs by security who demanded we drop the blunt in a porta crapper. We were out looking for someone else looking to sell or share. This dude from the anti-drug campaign above the influence rolls past handing out bracelets and sheet with their logo and crap on it. Hez announcing Hez giving away free stuff, and my girlfriend, who was apparently deliriously desperate, she looks at me with that AHHC jackpot look in her eyes and says, dude, Hez got free stuff, and starts jogging toward him. So in less than a second she's too far away for her to hear me, and I'm not gonna run up and grab a girl in a public event like that, so I just watch the interaction. They talk for like 20 seconds. My girlfriend starts pointing around and gesturing, then slowly walks back to me all defeated and says, I asked him about getting us some stuff and he seemed confused and said, well, I'm kinda on the clock right now. An earlier commenter who talked about the woman with the kids who cut everyone off in line to use a shower reminded me of a very similar story. I was at my local grocery store picking up some cold cuts. At the deli you have to take a number and wait for them to call you. I take my number and patiently wait for it to be called. A couple of minutes later, a woman with her teenage daughter approach. She clearly saw me waiting in front, but pretended not to see me and just cut me off. I could have told her that you need to take a number to get served, and typically I would tell someone if they go to the back of the line without taking one, but this woman didn't deserve that courtesy. So I sat there and watched her wait at the counter in front of me while others came up and took numbers. When the deli worker approached the counter, the woman assertively and quickly got her attention to place an order. I saw the worker say something to her and gesture to the electronic number display. The woman embarrassingly turns away and asks me in a hurried sort of way, pointing at the thing that holds the tickets, is that where the numbers are? It was hilarious. I still remember that experience because of how arrogant that woman was. She knew I was there, but thought she was better than everyone and didn't have to wait her turn. I also remember her laughing and whispering to her daughter after they cut in front of me. Epic. Not quite me, but one of my friends let me blunder into a snafu. It was my senior year of high school. Prom was coming up, and there was this drop-dead gorgeous girl I had been talking to for a few weeks. We barely knew each other, and she was probably out of my league, but I thought, hey, I'm graduating soon, let's do this. So my friends helped me put together a sign that says, let's crush prom, and we buy 2 cases of grape crush soda. Through a harmless white lie, I arranged to meet her in the parking lot of the local mall. We pull in and park a few spaces away from her. My friend, let's call him Buster, gets out and approaches the girl, whom we shall call Mariah, to stall for time while I get the sign out. They're on the other side of her car, out of earshot and view. So once I'm good to go, I grab the sign and stroll around to show her. I interrupt what must have been a very interesting conversation, because Mariah sees the sign and instantly looks stricken. Buster, on the other hand, is trying his hardest not to laugh. Mariah reads the sign and looks at me, then slowly says, "You want to go to prom? With me?" Being a dumbass, I say yes, then look from Mariah to Buster and back again. Behind me, I can hear crickets chirp as the rest of my friends stand motionless, like deer in headlights. Slowly, the situation unfreezes as Mariah explains that she already has a date. I can feel my cheeks burning with embarrassment. Meanwhile, Buster is behind Mariah, absolutely howling with silent laughter. After a minute of awkward chit-chat, we say our goodbyes and part ways. The moment we are back in my car, I turn to Buster and ask what was so funny, besides my humiliation. He looks at me and, through laughing tears, tells me that about 10 seconds before I approached Mariah, she had told him that she was going to prom with a guy who took her to his high school's prom. He realized that he had plenty of time to save me, but instead decided he wanted to watch me make a fool of myself in front of this stunning girl. I haven't spoken to Mariah since then. I have not forgiven Buster for that, and he has never let me hear the end of it. I stopped myself from telling my supervisor the new director's actual name. He kept talking to me one-on-one about his meeting with Jenna, and how he really wanted to make a good impression with Jenna, because she was looking to promote someone to assistant director. Her name is actually Gina. He must have read it wrong in an email or something, but I watched him go up to her with confidence when she came over to visit our team and say, "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Jenna. I've heard such wonderful things." To which she just furrowed her brow, cocked her head to the side, smiled and said thanks while shaking his hand. He seemed confused by her reaction, but didn't say anything. He walked around with her as she came to each of our desks to see what we were working on, and I made sure to say, "Well, Gina, I'm working on." And I saw my supervisor's face drop. She left a couple minutes later, and he immediately came over to me and asked, "Why didn't you tell me her name wasn't Jenna?" And I lied and said I thought he was talking about someone else in our one-on-one. That happened about 2 years ago, and to this day, she still makes jokes about it. She'll occasionally call one of us team members to have us tell him that Jenna wants to see him in her office. It's now just a humorous thing around the office. I have to post this one. So I worked at a dealership, and one of the secretaries wanted to buy a Mustang from a different dealership and asked me to go with her or check it out. I told her I couldn't go, but that she could test drive it herself and just bring it here. When she left, I told my friend that I was going. Tell her that the car was no good because the cheap point wasn't working and that he had to come out after I talked to her and check it out too and say the same thing. So she brings the Mustang. I pop the hood and tell her to rev it a little. I tell it, "Girl, it's no good. The cheap point is making a weird noise," and I tell her to listen. She's there listening. Then my friend comes out and I ask him to check it. He listens to the engine and says, "HMM, the cheap point is making a weird noise." I go, "Right, I noticed that too." I tell her that they are trying to rip her off. She gets so mad, she jumps in the car and leaves before I could tell her we were joking. I cold stopped her and tell her, "But, you know." I look at my friend, he's in tears. My face hurts already from laughing. She comes back and she tells us that she threw the keys and said to the other dealer, "Here, you're trying to rip me off, the cheap point doesn't work." And she said the dealer told her, "Oh well, we can knock $500 off." We didn't tell her the truth for 2 weeks. When we did, she stopped talking to me for a whole month. Hahaha. I posted this before, but dug it up because I thought it was relevant. There was a similar situation at my previous place of employ. A guy claimed to be able to speak fluent Japanese when he was hired. Same jig as you. Except those people would then come to me, "I do in fact speak Japanese fluently," and tell me these great new words that Bob taught them. This differed from my own approach, where when asked about how to say this or that, I would tell people that, if they were genuinely interested in the language, that they should take proper lessons. I can't tell you how many times I fought back my laughter and puzzled expressions, but I let the ruse continue and feigned amazement. After all, I was laughing about it. Then one day Bob and I encounter each other at lunch. Up until then, I suspect Bob sought to avoid any interaction with me whatsoever. Anyhow, delighted at this prosperous union of two supposedly fluent Japanese speakers, fellow colleagues asked us to have a conversation in Japanese. So we smiled, did the usual greeting. Konnichiwa, he said. Hey, konnichiwa, I responded. And then I just stared at him as he started to sweat bullets. I gave him the wide-eyed go on, say something look, and he just muttered a few clickety-clackety vowels in a fashion that might have to an unfamiliar ear passed as Japanese. I of course returned the gesture and made up some clickety-clackety noises too. And we carried on for the next minute clicking and clacking at each other with made up faces. All of this was happening to everyone's delight. And I could see that Bob was quite relieved at being able to save face and see that I wasn't out to destroy him. Later on, he thanked me privately and we went out for drinks and had a mighty good laugh. Although it's been years since we parted ways with our previous employer, Bob and I still remain friends and laugh about the time we first met. In high school I hung out mainly with the computer club kids, since we would all play some Counter-Strike type games in the computer lab each day after school and they were a relatively drama-free group. One day my friend Sujay is talking to me about how he wants to get his crush something for Valentine's Day, but doesn't know what to get. Keep in mind that his crush Julia is one of the most attractive girls at my school, so I'm trying to keep his ideas relatively sane and not super creepy. Sujay is Indian, by that I mean from the country India, just so there's no confusion, and his family is very strict when it comes to girls. We are trading ideas and I suggested flowers, since it's easy to get and hell, who doesn't like a good bouquet? So the night before the big day, I go and get some flowers, since he can't buy them, and bring them to his house due to his mother. I meet up with him the next morning and give him the flowers, and he hands me the cash for them. All is well throughout the day and right as the school bell rings marking the end of classes, Sujay sprints as fast as his short legs will let him to the parking lot. A few others joined me as we watched him sprinting to what he thought was Julia's car, I realizing the moment he placed the flowers on the windshield with some personal note that he had indeed chosen the wrong car. As much I wanted to inform him of his mistake, I was curious to see how this would all go down and so I kept my mouth shut and watched the curtains rise on the shit show to come. Sure enough, Sujay realizes his mistake only after watching Julia get into a different car and drive off. Moments later a dude on either the football or baseball team walks to his car to find a bouquet of flowers and a note confessing love for him. The look on both their faces was absolutely divine. One consisting of utter confusion and the other one of absolute fear and humiliation. Eventually the school stopped talking about the incident, but it's an experience neither him or I will probably ever forget. I'll try and keep this short. A group of us were out one Saturday night, long time ago, getting some drinks pre-nightclub. My best friend Dave was with us this particular evening. Normally he didn't club with us as we were all into grunge and stuff at this time, and frequented a metal club, which wasn't really his scene. Anyway, we were sat in the pub supping a beer or three, waiting on a couple of girls still to turn up. One was a close friend of ours, another was a friend of one of the other girls in our party, who none of the rest of us had ever met before. As way of a bit of a warning, she tells us a little bit about her, mainly that she was a bit unhinged and had been conversing with some dude on death row in the US, we are UK, and was making designs on flying over there and getting hitched to this guy. God knows why she was friends with her in the first place. Crucial to this story is that my mate Dave had never met either of the girls we are waiting on arriving. Scooby snack if you can guess what happened next. One girl turns up. Weird death row penpal girl we have never met before. She sits down next to Dave and we continue our small talk. Dave, however, presumes she is our close friend and as way of conversation begins to warn her about this crazy girl who is turning up soon and how she should be careful about what she says as she is a bit of a nutter. Couldn't find any way to tell him either without making an already bad situation worse, so all I could do was slowly sink into my seat trying not to piss myself laughing as he digs his hole deeper and deeper with every word. Grew up working on a dairy farm. Always had new young guys come work during the summer to bale hay. They were always high school football jocks who thought they would show off and throw bales extra far and over their head, etc. It was annoying, but whatever. As long as the job got done. Well, we would always stop for lunch and grandma would make us the most amazing homemade lunches. Everything from scratch. I remember she would always make a homemade chocolate cake that was absolutely amazing. Now, I don't know why, but the new kids' egos even led them to want to prove they could eat more than everyone. We, of course, knew the consequences of eating too much before going back to hard labor, but we were so annoyed by these kids that we would let them eat as much as they could. They would puke all over themselves during work every single time. TLDR cocky high schoolers who we would hire to bale hay on the farm would eat so much at lunch and then puke. We never warned them. High school. We had to pick a city from Africa and talk about it. You know, the basics. Copy paste from Wikipedia. Easy note, there's no way you can fuck up this. Almost. Meet Antonella. This girl, she's not very smart. She's not good looking either, but she has a heart of gold. Except she doesn't. She hates everybody. For some reason, she started attacking everybody from day one, so we don't hang out with her. She has this only friend that, when our teacher asked what countries we had chosen, told her to say Paris. This is where I come in. She, of course, says Paris, because she doesn't know Paris isn't in Africa. We all laugh. Everybody takes it as a joke, but just to see if she really makes an entire presentation based on Paris and still doesn't realize it's not in Africa, I say to the professor that she picked South Africa, then proceed to tell her Paris was in South Africa. Fast forward a week later, she's right there, ready to make a presentation about Paris. Professor shut the whole thing down before we got the chance to see if she had actually did a whole presentation on Paris without realizing Paris isn't part of Africa. Imagine a French class full of 13-year-olds. The teacher is out sick and the substitute has been given a film for us to watch with careful instructions about several such scenes that has to be fast forwarded through. She slept though most of the set scene, then woke in a panic and began to frantically rewind. This was in the days of VHS, so we all saw the scene occur comically backwards with full sound, but backwards and like chipmunks. Everyone was laughing, and some were crying, because it was so funny. She is getting more and more panicked as the scene goes on, and announces that she must be fast forwarding by accident, so she begins to play the video at normal speed, then fast forward, then rewind. We watched that scene many times, forward, backward, fast slow normal speed, then she took the video out of the player, ran out of the room crying, and we never had her as a substitute again. What was the scene? Some guy comes back from a war or something, and the woman he loves is dying of consumption, so he has passionate sex with her lifeless corpse. Full frontal nudity and very disturbing. So I was working in a scene shop, and the TD brings in a bunch of new tools / paint / supplies for us to keep building sets with, and among these things is this paint mixing auger that you're supposed to put in a cordless drill. So this guy, we'll call him Keith, gets the auger and a 5-gallon bucket of white paint, but the auger shaft is too big to fit into any of our drill chucks. So Keith gets the idea that it will fit in this giant old drill press we have. He puts the auger in and is all ready to go when I ask him, "Are you sure that's a good idea?" He says, "You're right, I should test it," and just flips the switch on and off real fast with the auger above the paint line. So now he's determined. So I tell everyone else to grab their projects and get away from Keith and the drill press. He turns it on and lets it get up to speed, then starts lowering the auger. Almost as soon as he touches the surface of the paint, the entire 5 gallons exploded out of the top of the bucket, covering Keith, the press, and a 12-foot radius around them on the floor, save for a vaguely Keith-shaped line where he blocked the paint. I knew it was going to happen from the moment he pitched the idea, but I preferred that he wasted the effort cleaning up than waste my own effort fighting with him about it, knowing he'd do it anyway. We left the paint circle on the ground 4 years after, and used it as a teaching tool for noobers on why you need to think before you act. Not exactly what is asked, but sold liquid LSD a long time ago. Was at a party in Chicago in 1998 or so, live at the decks, and had a bottle on me, making cash. Had a guy buy 10. I tell him to open his mouth, and squirted all 10, plus a bit more in dude's mouth. He leans back, and gets that oh shit look. Yells dude, that was for all of us. At me, and indicates his friends who were loosely standing around. In my defense, they just looked like party kids, weren't up close to me or anything, and he didn't say anything about distribution to me, so I think it was a valid mistake. Also, I may or may not have been on UHH, LSD, MDMA, weed and coke, so shit was sideways anyway. Had cash falling out of my pockets all night, it was nuts. Still went home with $500 plus, and trades. So yeah, Eddie from Erie, Pennsylvania, my apologies. I have not forgotten what I did to you. I hope shit worked out. I have a group of friends that I'd play indoor soccer with while we were still in school. One of my good friends has a bit of a temper, and he can be known to rage. Now, these games were a bit rough, so sometimes the refs would try to hold a tight leash and call fouls so that the players would not get out of control. This specific game, the ref was calling foul after foul, and most of them were being called on our team. All of us were getting pissed and talking shit to the other players and refs, but one foul got called on my friend and he just lost it. He proceeds to get into the referee's face and yell death threats. Then he threatens to murder the referee's family, yelling these threats loud enough for everyone inside the sports complex to hear. He stalks off the field after clearly being thrown out of the game and picks up a 5-foot bench, lifts it over his head, and throws it against the wall at full force. We all probably should have stopped him, but we were all kinda shocked and curious. He continues his Hulk-like rage, walking through the stands full of parents and kids. He yells at a ton of parents from the other team, telling them how terrible they are, and that they're raising failing kids etc. The cops get caught, but by that point I had left the game cause I didn't want to be an accomplice. I worked as a team building instructor in the summer. I was one of only 2 women who worked there. We ran kids' birthdays, stag do's, and many corporate days. Tasks involved quad biking, paintballing and raft building etc. It's another corporate away day, and on these days each instructor runs one activity throughout the day rather than rotating. That day I was in charge of raft building. You have a number of barrels, rope and a pallet to make a raft to get your team across a river glorified pond. As part of my job I supported teams, offering tips etc. This one group was particularly fun. A very clear alpha in the group stepped up, immediately bossing around the new young recruits. I offered a hand in how to tie a knot quickly. I've done this task 3 times before, and I think I know a little bit more about tying a knot than you do. I should point out here his suggested raft model was flawed, so I tried to help. Now normally I'm a patient person, but nope, done here. We get to the task starting. 2 teams having a race, and Big Shot has nominated some poor graduate to get on the raft first. I stopped and suggested that seeing as he'd designed the raft and believed in it so much, he should lead the team. Ego questioned. Mr. Alpha steps up. I blow the whistle to start the race. The raft flips and Mr. Alpha gets a dunking in the pond. His team did not win. Let my little brother try to talk to some black kids in the neighborhood. He got laughed back into the house. Backstory: he's 12 and a total sheethead. He sags his pants, wears oversized tap-out shirts and off-brand shoes that he's really protective of. They look like a knockoff Nike I guess. Him and his friends walk around with skateboards they can't use in one hand and their pants in the other. He uses the N-word like it's nothing, calling himself, his friends, the older brother's manager. We tell him all the time he's going to get his ass kicked doing those lame-ass handshakes, throwing gang signs, cursing at people on the school bus. So one day the little twerp and his turd friends walk up to a group of black kids, probably the same age, but they looked like level kids that had never seen this shit. We were sitting outside watching, because we wanted to see what would happen, exactly what we thought would. They walk over and start talking. We weren't sure what they were saying, but they were doing that hand thing they do together. My brother's got one hand on his crotch, and I guess he was trying to make friends. The other kids stared at them like they were insane, of course. Suddenly we all hear little bro say manager. and a woman comes out the house they're standing by. She starts waving her hands around, shooing them away, and they started calling her a beach. At this point, we were considering intervening or telling our mom, so she could plan the funeral lol, but it was a good show. So this lady starts tearing into them about respect, racism, God, and would you talk to your mother like that? And no, he wouldn't. Once he comes home, he's an innocent little cherub. They walk away with their heads down, and we all just pointed and laughed at them, because it's like 12-year-olds just got theirs handed to them. We made him go back and apologize later that day, but it was still funny. Well, this is halfway between an embarrassing mistake and a prank, but seeing as it just came to its conclusion, I think I'll share. It fits because I could have said something years ago but I hadn't, until recently. I think it's the worst thing I've ever done to my wife. It is long, so I'll put a TLDR at the end. One summer day around 4 years ago I started playing Dark Souls. I'm sure most of you know by now about that fun time game, and how it is known for its difficulty. Well, I got really into it, and after a couple weeks of playing I got my good friend into it and my wife, girlfriend at the time. So the three of us would get together, BBQ and play Dark Souls as a jolly team. Until one such session, when my wife asks to us, what does this dried finger item do? Before I could respond myself, our mutual friend says massively increases drop chance. I shot him a look behind her back, and he winked at me. I winked back. This was 4 years ago, during the first game. You know where this is going. Using dried fingers in Dark Souls does not increase the rate of loot drop. It increases the rate of invasions by other players to your world, frequently sending 2 invaders at once to fuck your shit up. After you killing one or both, usually within minutes you would have another invader come in. In essence, using the dried finger is less like painting a target on your back and more like covering your naked self in honey and running through the Amazon. Couple this with the fact that my wife loves loot in games, so constant dried finger usage by her, and her situation was, well, faked. She was constantly invaded. Even with summoning both of us, it was challenging to get in and help her defend against 2 red phantoms, while also trying to help her survive each area's regular enemies. Eventually, we all beat the game, my wife on hard mode, and continued on with our lives. Then Dark Souls 2 came out, and we all got together again. Sometime in those first few hours of the weekend my wife exclaims, "Oh right, I have to use my dried fingers." My friend and I holding back the laughter as we raised our eyebrows and smiling sinisterly to each other behind her back. She rage quit many times after being murdered constantly, sometimes almost in tears. So many times I wanted to tell her, just so she could progress, so that I could get back to my own game instead of help her deal with those legions of Reddit hats. My friend and I agreed we would wait until Dark Souls was all done before we told her of our great deception. She suffered through all of Dark Souls 3, dying around 50 plus times just on the way to the dancer 2 weekends ago. We all finished the final DLC together. She almost had a nervous breakdown on her 30th invasion in the span of a couple hours just on that large stairway down to the swampy area with all those bugs. But she persisted. A true hero. It was around midnight Saturday we killed the final boss. While the ending was a bit anticlimactic, we had our own hidden ending planned. Without saying a word, after we closed down the game I sent my wife a link to the Dried Fingers wiki page. "Oh yeah, dried fingers. What about M?" she exclaimed innocently. "Read it," my friend grumbled. As she read I could see her eyes doubling back, tripling back, reading it over and over as our smiles grew wider. She was in total shock. "How many times?" was all she could say, her face red, eyes watery. "Looks like you're better at Dark Souls than either of us to make it through that cheat fest," I told her. Somehow we are still married. TLDR. Friend told my wife Dark Souls item was good, but actually made the game 10x harder. Wife plays through all Dark Souls games using said item. I was in kindergarten. It was lunchtime, and the pizza they were serving was particularly horrible that day. I wasn't eating it, which didn't go unnoticed by the teaching assistant. A few minutes into lunch, she sent me to the silent lunch table, basically lunchtime detention. While I was sitting there with nothing to do, a 4th or 5th grade class was lining up to leave. One of the kids in the line was standing next to the fire alarm pull handle, and out of boredom, he started to mess with it. I thought about letting the teacher watching over the silent lunch table know, but I was done with lunch, bored since I couldn't talk to anyone, and had never heard the alarm go off before. I figured whatever happened would be much more interesting than sitting there picking at my food, so I just continued to watch the kid play with the alarm. For some reason it was taking the class a long time to leave, and several minutes after I noticed the kid, he finally pulled it all the way and the alarm went off. Everyone evacuated, and I got to enjoy talking with my friends for the rest of the lunch period. I decided I didn't really want the kid to get in trouble, so I didn't say anything about it. It didn't matter though. As we were walking back in, I saw the firefighters and a police officer had the kid off to one side with the principal. Lunch for my class was practically over, and no one else, including the teaching assistant, got to finish their food. After she had punished me for not eating my lunch, I felt a bit of satisfaction knowing she didn't get to eat her lunch because of something I could have prevented. Ooh, my favorite story we tell new additions to our friend group. I have a friend whose mother has brain damage. All of us are aware of this, and so he tells stories sometimes of what things she had done during that day, or what sudden revelation she had. Sounds sad, but we all laugh with him, because that's how we help each other get by, and he can see the humor in these things. We'll call him Jay. Anyways, he's telling us this story of how he and his mom were watching Family Feud, and she looks at Steve Harvey, looks back at my friend, back at the TV, back at him. Suddenly she goes, Jay, I get it. You can only have one or the other. A beard, or a mustache. Our friend has a mighty fine beard, by the way. We all start laughing about it, except one of our other friends. He just looks so astonished that she didn't get that before. He starts asking Jay questions about it, and I see this. Jay hasn't quite caught on. The rest of us start noticing this weird behavior, and why our other friend is asking all of this. We all realize why. After a bit more conversation, Jay gets it too. The gear has finally clicked. He suddenly says, dude, my mom has brain damage. Somehow, even though it's been years, our friend had forgotten this. We all start cracking up, and a third friend laughed so hard they ended up throwing up. So now as we are introducing people to the group, after they're a little comfortable around us, we get to say, hey, Jay said his mom has brain damage and Elle threw up, which is great, because then we refuse to expand on it for a while, until Elle complains a bunch. TLD, our friend exclaims his mom has brain damage and other friend laughs so hard they throw up. At my year 7 camp, swinging was an activity. Yes, though it was team building. The guy pushing me on the swing figured out that the length of the chains on each swing was way longer than the poles holding them up, meaning you could push someone any direction and they'd go flying. So without knowing this, the guy keeps pushing me slightly to the left each time. I notice when it's too late and slam into the pole. I get up and crack up laughing at how I fell for it. Another guy, let's call him Rob, hadn't seen what happened to me and nearly begs the guy who pushed me to push him on the swing. Having been played, I sit back and watch the guy push Rob slowly left, like he did to me. The guy screamed out, oh god no, before hitting the pole and slammed into it. After pissing ourselves, we helped Rob up, who proceeded to laugh with us. This continued on throughout the camp, and by the end almost everyone knew what the payoff was and stood around to witness it each time. TLDR, friend figures out that he can swing me into a pole on a swing set. Claims victims like a wildfire. Young substitute pharmacy tech who worked part-time for all of 3 months acts like a manager dictating tasks. We had a really bad substitute pharmacist that day too, but I gave a 15-minute, relatively short, wait time to a customer because he was a good one who was only bad when he would get impatient and the medication was incredibly simple to refill. Wannabe manager technician starts shrieking at me that the wait times have to be at least 30 minutes and she's going to work the counter since I can't take scripts properly, regardless that it was a simple refill I had already checked and made sure went through insurance and was appropriate to fill while talking with the customer and would only need to slap a label on and get the pharmacist to. Okay. Female customer comes up to her, wants her meds filled here instead of the usual pharmacy, same pharmacy chain, so we have her in our system. So baby's first job asks for the customer's date of birth, to find her in the computer. Is told the year is around the 1970s, and the clueless child asks for clarification by saying sorry you said 1950 what? Notice, please never even subtlety suggest to women in their 40s that they look like they are breaking 60. Normally I would rushed over to help defuse the situation, but I stayed in the back and enjoyed every second of it. It got better too, because the customer wanted a controlled medication transferred, and those take extra long, because the pharmacist at the other store needs to okay it. So of course, trying to make the customer happy, the dingus gives her a 15-minute wait time, which they obviously can't meet, and which I proceed to rub in her face the whole rest of the time I'm there, because that's another thing she got yelled at over. Just the best example of karma I ever witnessed. Way back in Boy Scouts we went to a jamboree, a camp weekend with dozens, sometimes hundreds of scout groups. Our troop had a tradition of sending the new kid asking around for a left-handed screwdriver at some point during their first camp out. The troop next to us was a split off of our troop, and they had the same tradition. Early Sunday morning this kid comes over to our troop, and guess what he's asking for? He stops by each of us in turn, and we all direct him away with I think someone has one. Why don't you ask them? At some point he runs out of scouts, and one of our guys sends him to the next camp over, figuring they don't know the joke and they'll just laugh at him. Sometime around dusk adults at the troop next door come over to us looking for this kid. Turns out he's been gone all day. We recount the story and they go into a panic. Just as they are about to leave to contact the police, this same kid wanders into camp, very frustrated. Turns out he's visited almost every single troop at the jamboree looking for the left-handed screwdriver, and they all sent him to the next troop. Nobody broke the chain. He only gave up and came back because it was getting dark. When I was in college I helped found a group called Men Against Rape, MARS, and after recruiting about 2/3 of the people myself we held our first brainstorming meeting. I very strongly wanted to get a campaign that embraced the machismo image, went to frat parties, but passed out buttons saying only yes means yes and other stuff. I wanted to appeal to the bro image of masculinity, to provide a message to the audience that needs to hear it. Needless to say, I was booed and jeered at because I was reinforcing a patriarchy and such stuff. They wanted to put up posters and hold chat sessions in the park, so I quit. 2 months later, I got to watch them perform one of their events called Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, where they literally paraded around in high heels. All the brothers called them names and threw stuff at them. They just wanted to do things that made them feel like they were helping, even if it was pointless. I got a sick kick at watching those self-congratulatory social justice warriors destroy their own movement under the weight of their own smug superiority. I still am pissed that they missed the opportunity to tackle rape and instead tackled their own egos though. I bowl on a Sunday league with my father and have been doing so for around 17 months now. So, you know that stick thing that comes down and sweeps off the pins that have fallen over after being hit with the first throw? Well, that stick thing got stuck. My dad and I have just started our 2-ed game of the day. This was last Sunday, so I see my dad walk up to the lane. He's a bit antsy because the other team we were playing against are being slow as fuck. He sees the stick go down to clear the pins, so he prepares himself and steps on his mark and is getting ready to throw when I see that the stick thing never raised back up. Instead of saying anything, I decided to see what would happen. So he throws a hard 15-pound ball down the lane without looking, and everyone within 4 lanes of us became quiet as we watched a faking bowling ball about to collide with the expensive pen resetting machinery at full force. Catch fucking boom. 40 lanes worth of bowlers become quiet as we see the bowling ball collide and bounce 4 feet into the air, and then the sickening sound as a 15-pound bowling ball falls from 4 feet onto the wood lane. I could have stopped it, but I didn't. I always wondered what a bowling ball hitting expensive machinery looked like. I guess now I know. This happened while I was stationed on a Coast Guard cutter. We got a new seaman, fresh out of boot camp, who was trying to learn the ropes, not literally, while we were at home port between patrols. So there's a rank in the military, known as a warrant officer. Best way I can describe them in layman's terms is that, while an officer is kind of a jack of all trades manager and an enlisted person is a subject matter expert and technician, a warrant is a little bit of both. They start out enlisted, and eventually are chosen to be warrant officers within their field of expertise, which means they get saluted like any other officer. Our only warrant on the ship was a super chill guy nearing the end of his time in the service, who was basically our chief engineer. Warrants have a reputation of being brash, angry, and salty, but this guy was the opposite. Anyway, another more experienced seaman, who wasn't particularly bright, so this really impressed me, decided to mess with the new girl. He convinced her that, when you see a warrant, you really ought to pay respect to both their enlisted career and their newer officer one, so you give them a two-handed salute, one for each role. She bought it hook, line, and sinker, and sure enough pops off a double-handed salute to the warrant coming across the flight deck first thing in the morning. He gave her a very confused look, and maybe politely set her straight, as was his way, while the rest of us filthy deckers were cracking up on the pier. Senior year, around the time of homecoming. This sort of qualifies. My friend, we'll call him Andrew, had some issues with anxiety. He'd be fine, unless he was put in a public situation that he deemed awkward, which was a broad category truth be told. However, he really was / a nice guy, and didn't really deserve any of this. He and I were in the same instrument section, mellophones, the best section, and he wanted to ask our section leader, our age, known her since freshman year, to the dance. He was going to surprise her after school with flowers and ask her, no real romantic overtones save for the flowers which were really just a formality. Anyway, word gets out to the section leader, Catherine. She does not want to go to the dance with Andrew and feels really bad that he is going to this amount of trouble. I, hearing this, race to go and find him and tell him to forget the whole thing. I, stupid 17-year-old me, have a thought that maybe it would be better if he heard it from her rather than secondhand. To this day, I'm unable to justify that decision and still feel like shit about it. So I stop and wait. He walks by, grinning with the bundle of flowers in tow. I wave. He walks into the practice room, with Catherine and her friends inside, only to find that his day had been ruined for 15 minutes already and nobody thought to tell him. 4 years later, we are still very good friends. If I recall, it took him a week or two to forgive me, but that was probably a lot quicker than I deserved. When I was around the age of 16, our neighbor across the street would sometimes come over and knock on our door to ask my brother and I can go skating with him or ride scooters. He often did tricks with his scooter down the downside street we lived on and would sometimes jump over our skateboards with his scooter at high speeds. So one day, we were watching him jump over 2 skateboards at a time and then 3. The neighborhood thick bully kid who was about 18 or 19 came and pressured him to jump more skateboards. Our friend had no fear at this point because he kept landing over each skateboard that was added right behind the last one. So about 6 skateboards were jumped. Then the 7th one came in. My brother and I were faking impressed at this point lol. So the bully told him to add the last one, the 7th skateboard. My brother and I were very skeptical on the last one because he barely made the 6th added board. But this idiot was unstoppable. He gathered enough speed from the uphill side of the street and came in with the speed of light. Once he got very close to the lined up boards, he set his jumping stance and jumped. Clipped the first skateboard with the front wheel of his scooter and flew face forward like Superman. I'm not exaggerating, this really happened. Hands and legs trying to catch a balance to his fall, but falls face first into the street. Broke his dad's watch, broke his own tooth, probably impacted his gums so bad. He got up really quick and looked at us, cried and ran to his house as quickly as possible. I felt bad cause I never actually thought we would hear him cry. Later that day, he came knocking at our door and acted like it was so cool and showed us his chipped front tooth. To this day, he still has a fake part on that tooth. When I was 18, my best friend and I went to Paris. We'd been having a pretty good trip, but we were young and this was our first time traveling, and so we were both a bit stressed and managed to piss each other off now and then. She'd been getting increasingly annoyed with me for dumb stuff, like walking too slow or stopping to look at something she thought was boring. Meanwhile, anytime she had to pee, or was tired, or was hungry, which on a budget trip to Europe is pretty much all the time, the whole world had stopped on its axis until we tended to her needs. Anyway, it came to a head in the middle of the trip when we were walking to Notre Dame. She criticized me about something stupid, I snapped, and we walked all the way to Notre Dame on different sides of the street. At one point I realized she was walking into a construction zone, but I didn't try to stop her. A construction worker came up and tried to stop her, but he was speaking French, and she just sort of giggled and tried to go around him. When she realized what was going on, she turned bright red. All the construction dudes were laughing at her. I was very pleased. We made up. Though a few days later we were in the park eating a baguette and had another tiff about something. She's afraid of birds. I threw a bunch of crumbs at her feet and she was swarmed by pigeons. That was 10 years ago and we are still friends. She's actually coming to visit me tomorrow. I still give her shit for that day. A buddy of mine got asked out to dinner by a girl I know. The girl told me she was asking him out to dinner because she wanted his help on a project not affiliated with school. He didn't know this. I decided to mess with him and told that it is probably a date, because why else would she ask you to dinner? The next day he talked to me about it and he said he felt a little uncomfortable, but it went fine. I talked to the girl and she said she decided not to ask him because he had said he has been really busy lately. We went back to his dorm, and by his door was a bouquet of flowers with a note that said had a great time, we should do it again sometime. Both of us stood there shocked. He started freaking out because she was a nice girl, but he didn't really want to date her, and it would be awkward because she was in our friend group. I told him not to worry because I thought the X's meant hugs, but he insisted that they meant kisses. A day or two later he comes to my room and is in a panic and tells me that he is planning on asking her out because there really isn't anything wrong with her. I started chuckling and said sure, if that's how you feel. And he said yeah, okay, I will. He then told me his plan to ask her out in a couple days. Well, the next day arrived and we were hanging outside and he sees the girl coming towards us to talk to us. My buddy just bolts away because he wasn't ready to ask her out yet and he still felt uncomfortable. She comes up to me and asks why he is acting so weird. I was getting late for class, so I started walking away and said I bought him flowers. I'm a construction foreman. On a recent job we had a pop-up tent set up over one of our saws. We were expecting rain for the day. It rained heavy for 3 hours and then the sun came out. It's about 4:30 in the afternoon, cleanup time. One of our newer guys, who is usually the guy this would happen to, points out the tent corner has filled with water. A lot of water. The canopy is barely hanging on the corner pole and has filled up with easily 30 gallons of water. I laugh at how full this thing is and decide to egg him on. I hand him a broom to push the canopy up, knowing it won't work, and even if it did he'd get pretty wet. He tries, but 30 gallons of water weighs at 240 pounds and isn't budging one bit. I'm watching and laughing from a safe distance. I shout for him to undo the corner. He's laughing and says no way is he falling for it. The two of us are laughing and I'm trying to get him to do it. It's such a funny scenario that we attract the attention of the crew. That day we had a brand new guy start on the job. He was a friend of the owners and had just got home from a military tour in Syria. Without any hesitation he runs over and pushes the mass of water. Doesn't move, so he pushes with all his might. The corner gives way and dumps 30 gallons of very cold water dead on his head. The look on his face was priceless. He is completely soaked head to toe. I haven't laughed that hard in my life. I was waiting for a thread like this. My friend, Private Nippus, pledge name, told me he was going on a Tinder date, and I was excited for him since he had been on a cold streak. However, when I overheard that the Tinder girl wanted to meet in a Walgreens parking lot, I started to realize he may be getting conned, but I was too eager to see how it would play out. Fast forward to the Walgreens parking lot, where Private Nippus has been waiting while his Tinder date was shopping inside with her mom. After 2 hours, She finally comes out and talks to Private Nippus in person. Tinder girl, hey, I'm really sorry, but my mom is mad at me because I owe her money. Private Nippus, pledge name, so you're saying if you gave her money you can hang out. Tinder girl, yeah, I owe he money and she's upset I can't pay her back. Private Nippus, how much money? Tinder girl, $60. Private Nippus proceeds to go into the Walgreens and purchase a pack of gum and got $60 cash back. Tinder girl, I'll go give this to my mom and I'll be right back. Private Nippus waited another hour before texting her asking her what was taking so long. Tinder girl, hey, I'm really sorry, but I can't hang out. When I talked to Private Nippus the next day, he was so excited to tell me about how his Tinder date went and how he'll definitely be going on a second date because she owes him money. It took him a couple days to realize he was conned, and only after he continually texted her and got shallow excuses about why she couldn't meet up again. TLDR, Private Nippus wasted 3 hours in a Walgreens parking lot and $60 because he thought a Tinder girl would be able to hang out if he paid her mom $60. This is for my military brothers, but it was a recovery week for us after training, and we were all bored faking around in our cages waiting for the 1SG to release us, and when we get bored, we find a way to not be bored. Know what I'm saying? So I was chilling with my squad, and we had a new guy who was just 3 days in. You know those new PVTs you get, and they're like deer in headlights trying to follow every command and do everything not to fuck up. We all been there. But anyway, chilling with the squad, and one of my buddies said to the new guy, hey man, I'm glad I forgot to tell you, but you need to go check out a BFA, blank firing adapter, for your M9. At this time I was minding my business and packing shit away in my locker, so I was only half listening, and it took me a second to register what he said. A BFA for a pistol? I was thinking to myself, that has got to be the stupidest, most brilliant thing I ever heard. You can't attach a blank firing adapter to the muzzle of a pistol. There's no way, and I immediately saw where this was going, so I didn't say anything, and was curious to see the outcome of this. So the idiot goes outside the cage to the armory and talks to Ulich, armory guy, great dude by the way, and he asks for an M9 BFA, and the look on his face to me was hilarious. Because he had no facial expression, he just stared at him, kind of like he was deciding if the private was a complete moron, or did someone set him up kind of look. I thought this was as far as the prank would go, but he fucking played along with it lol, and he's like, oh damn yeah, the place, platoon leader, has the box in his office. You gotta bring your weapon sign out sheets to him and sign one out. So to wrap this up, because I'm typing him off a faking novel, and I didn't even mean to, the idiot is literally standing parade dressed outside the PL's office. Did I think this would get this far? Fuck no, which is why this setup was faking gold. I followed him to see how this would end up, so then I asked him, bro, what are you doing? And at this point I'm at the edge of cracking the fuck up. Keep in mind this dude is just a nervous guy in general. He turns his head towards me with a concerned, worried as look on his face, and says, hey man, I've been thinking about this. Is there even such a thing? So relating to the topic, I wanted to see the outcome, so I poker faced the fuck out of it. I don't know how BC I'm at my breaking point before I start laughing, and I'm like, yeah dude, you need it before the next training event. So the door opens and the office was full of our chain of command Lumfeo, go figure. The Co. 1SG, First Lieutenant, place and our squad leader. I could tell he about sheet bricks, and they tell him to come in and asks what he wants, and he asks for an M9 BFA. And everyone loses their shit. Oh my god, it was the most funniest goddamn thing I have ever seen. End. It was several. Like watching a prank reality show with different people. Let me explain. I was taking an Amtrak train home, roughly a 3 hours trip. I was sitting by the aisle, but at the front of the car. It was in the afternoon and the train was packed. I was lucky to get that front car seat as it had no seats in front of it, a little extra room. Oh, and a clear sight to the bathroom, caddy corner from me. 10 minutes into the trip, any little vibration and the door would fly open. The lock must have been busted. I remained silent. Contestant number 1 came down the aisle quickly, though controlled. I remained silent as he went in and locked the door. A train passed right next to us, tipping the train. The door flew open. The guy was dropping a deuce. I remained silent. We locked eyes, his wide and panicked, mine a slight amusement I could feel jump from them as he grasped for the door, the result seeming as if he were being sucked into the toilet and grabbing anything to hold. The door slammed shut. I remained silent. Contestants 2 to 5 were boring. As contestant 1 left, he must have passed contestant 2 and explained what happened. The door doesn't lock. And 2 to 3 and 3 to 4 and 4 to 5. They were mostly ready. Hands were there to quickly close the door before full exposure, but not before we locked eyes. Frightful glances of shame. I remained quiet. Contestant 6 was an elderly lady, a grown mother, with trouble moving. Before she went in I told her it doesn't lock and flings open. She was grateful. But then contestant 7 came upon the scene. I remained silent. He opened the door. God only knows what was seen. He blocked my view. He shut the door and wheeled around back against the door, breathing heavy. The horror drained what color he had. We locked eyes. He was embarrassed. Sweat was forming. I grimaced and slightly shook my head. I mouthed the word pervert. I remained silent. Went to the movies with my big bro. I was about 17 or 18, and he is 8 years older than me. We needed to use the restroom like really bad after the movies. Home worse than me. So he rushes his ass, and I can tell he's headed straight for the women's restroom. I lift my hand and begin to open my mouth. But then I think, wait, let's see where this goes. He opens the door avoiding eye contact with the woman going out, and it clicks in his head after a couple steps past her. He comes back, red in the face, chuckling, apologizing profusely, saying sorry he thought it was the men's room. Perhaps not a great story, but I still hold it over his head because of my blunder, somewhat more recently, which he holds over mine. My older brother, about 3.5 years older than me, and my oldest brother, the one from the previous story, and I went to the movies. We're idiots. Let's start there. We went to the arcade area and noticed there wasn't a ticket cutter person, so we are like, fuck it, let's just go. We're all cheap and poor, so we go, but it's a 3D movie, so my older bro is taller than me. He nabs one out of the recycling bin. My oldest bro, much taller, gets his. And it's time for short to bias me. The glass is knee high, but the lid is chest high for me. I'm certain at this point, they know this probably won't go well. The facts. I make one attempt to tiptoeing. Come back with nothing. They chuckle sheet. Alright, fuck it, I'm all in. I basically jump a bit to reach in and grab my pair, but my prescription faking glasses don't come back on my face. They're red in the face, laughing their respective dicks off. I make an attempt to retrieve them. No go. Another pair of thirds. Grab my phone, hit the flashlight, target acquired, jump in further. At this point, if my brother is telling the story, I was halfway in, legs in the air like a wrong jack in the box, though I still hold he's exaggerating, but through some miracle, through my blurred vision having to turn my head, so not really having any sort of visual, I emerged triumphant. Messy, but I got M. The box with its lid up, my glasses in hand. Just then a worker and a manager walk by. They didn't really see anything. They just saw my brothers laughing and avoiding eye contact with everyone. Box open, third glasses hanging from my shirt. My prescription glasses grasped awkwardly long ways in my hand. Remember, it was a blind as grab. I spoke first out of sheer panic. My glasses fell in there. They shrugged and kept walking. I figured they thought the two bastards laughing at my ads had just thrown them in there, and I look a bit young, so it cold easily looked like one or both of them played a trick on me. They could have also not cared less. Either way, me and my oldest bro just go and buy tickets, fuck it. I can't not have one if they ask for it later. My older bro says fuck it, I'll get us seats. Anyway, I don't do that shit anymore, 3D or no, but I've always loved that story since. I don't know why I ran in at the chronology, but TLDR, my bro went into the wrong restroom, and I let him. And on another occasion him and my other bro let me trash dig for some glasses in a 3D glasses recycling bin, but I silver tongue deviled, not really, the employee and her manager, to not give a fuck about my shenanigans, after losing and retrieving my prescription glasses in said glasses bin. This is something that cold bean stopped and happened to me. I had my best friend who had moved across the country over at my house for a week, and one night my family decided to go see a movie at a drive-in, and we usually bring hot dogs or something to eat. Well, it had been really cloudy, but the forecast said only about 20% chance of rain. So in the middle of the movie, it starts pouring down rain and my whole family jumps into our tiny SUV. Me, my mom, my dad, my brother and his wife, my grandpa and of course my best friend. So we are trying to watch a movie through the back window, and it's pouring down rain, and I was thirsty, so right beside me the car was crammed. Was a thermo jug. Now we typically put cold water in these to drink, right? They're literally made for keeping stuff cold and hot too, I guess. Well, sure enough, I popped the lid open and started chugging it. It was a familiar taste. My mother had stuck the hot dogs in the jug to keep them warm. I had a mouthful of hot dog juice. Quickly realizing it, I wanted to spit it out, but I couldn't because I was stuck in the car and didn't want to make a mess, so I had to swallow it. I don't know if I can trust those jugs anymore. Had a friend who had smoked weed once or twice and wanted to try it again. We had a little sesh with my bong, but she was choking on the smoke a fair bit, but didn't want to quit because she felt embarrassed, I guess. I told her it was cool and I'd make some edibles. Made edibles the next day and put out a really nice spread of fruits, dips, cheese, crackers, all the good munches. She also had never seen Rick and Morty, so I suggested she watch that. I warned her about edibles beforehand, from my own personal experience, and said just start with 2 and wait a bit, see how you feel. So we are chilling on the second episode, and I'm feeling pretty nice. Had another bong hit, and she was wanting one chew all the while saying that she wasn't feeling it, and after about 10 minutes of this, she like, fuck it, I'm gonna grab some more brownies. I was fairly gone by this point and she's leaving the room, and I just gave her a smile and let her do it. I'd done exactly the same thing, and I was so gonna let history repeat itself. So, like 5 brownies and some bowls later, she's laughing at the show so hard, loving the nibbles and stuff, and has reverted back to her native language. Then she goes to the bathroom, and I really don't know how long she was in there, but I'm pretty sure it was close to 20 minutes or something. I was considering going to get her when she came back in. Her face is like bright red, and she struggled to tell me she'd been in the bathroom the whole time because she'd managed to get a pomegranate seed in her crotch, and after she figured out what it was, she was apparently just sitting in the bathroom laughing at this pomegranate in her underwear. This story is about something my friends allowed me to do. So a couple years ago I was at Six Flags Great America with a few of my buddies. The whole day there was this legendarily beautiful girl in a pink sweater, and me, being a young teenage boy, tried talking to her all day. We laughed and had some giggles until the time came where I had to say goodbye. After our last ride she continued to wait at that thing that shows a picture of yourself during the ride, and I left with all my friends not taking my eyes off her. She looked back at me and I waved. Then I heard my friends start laughing. I turn around, and before I know it, I walk into a sign that is water-based at the bottom, and it's about a good 4 feet 8 inches. I tripped on top of the thing in front of a huge crowd, embarrassing myself in front of pink sweater, and there my friends were, laughing at me hysterically along with a large portion of other people. I told them they were dicks for not telling me to watch out, and they said they just wanted to see if I would notice. Anyways, in the end she walked over after I fell and asked if I were okay, and she helped me up. I asked her for her number. She said today was fun, as we saw each other under multiple accounts and lines, but she has a boyfriend. RIP. I hurt my knee and elbow only to be let down. TLDR. Friends are dicks, and allow me to walk into a sign in front of a girl I was hitting on along with a large crowd at Six Flags. Thanks to my parents, who didn't give two craps about childhood trauma, they turned out more and more abusive as time goes. I escaped once I turned 18. I developed some sort of phobia to embarrassment. This is the story. I was around 4 to 5 and is in the autistic spectrum. They never found out until I'm a full adult, so I fall into my own thoughts very often. I was in a busy store and spaced out, and I got bumped into, so I turned around looking for my mom's hand to hold on to, so I won't get lost, and saw a pair of female hands. I was about to grab it thinking it's my mother, since she was supposed to be right behind me, but I noticed some viral infections and immediately bluntly said, "Mom, you need to wash your hands better." Then I looked up and saw a very upset woman. I panicked and ran out the store. I was right by the entrance and realized both of my parents were just there watching me the whole time, being lost and mistaking a stranger as my mom. They really shouldn't have done that, consider I would really have followed anyone home, and the store was Black Friday packed. But nope. They were all chill, just laughing. Traumatized still over 15 years later. Late to the party, but I've got a great one. When I was 19 or 20 I moved to As from me, but before my big trip my dad and I went to visit my grandma and grandpa and spent some time with them. Now, my grandparents are the type that buy things from the home shopping network and such, and it seems like every time I visit they have a new gadget or two. This leads to a kind of scavenger hunt for the family. We don't show up with that in mind, but it's just something everyone does unintentionally. I'm sitting on the couch and my dad is doing the hunt, and I hear him say, "What's this?" I look at him, and I saw what he had in his hand. It actually happened really fast, and I'm not sure if I'd have let it happen if I had time to say something, but in that fraction of a second I remember thinking, he's not. He is. Before allowing anyone to respond he does it. It was pepper spray in those pouches that allow you to latch it to your belt. He sprayed it with full force directly into his mouth. He was crying and on the floor. He was angry, sad and embarrassed all at the same time. I don't remember what my grandma gave him or what anyone did, but once he recovered he said, "I thought it was mouthwash." Ha 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 ha. TLDR helped my friend dig a huge hole in his parents' garden whilst they were on holiday. When we were around 17, my best mate's parents went on holiday, leaving the house in his care. Now normal teenagers might have planned a party or something. Nope. I got a phone call on the Saturday morning demanding that I bring a garden fork and spade. One of our other friends had somehow convinced him that it would be a great idea to build a pit to put his trampoline in. I knew it was a bad idea, and the text from the other friend saying just go with it was enough to convince me that it was in principle a bad idea, but fuck it, that sounded like fun. 7 hours late we had dug an 11 feet wide and 5 feet deep hole to end the center of the garden. Worth noting that this was a suburban garden in England, so the hole was not insubstantial in comparison to the rest. That evening we proceeded to light a fire on his patio using wood from a fence panel that had fallen down before his parents went on holiday. For some reason he added a pair of shoes to the fire. The stain is still on the patio 10 years later. The next morning he phoned me in a panic as his parents would be home that evening. Our solution? Try and turn the pit into a pond. Still has that pond, only now it has fish in it. Trampoline would have been better. TLDR. German workman driving on the wrong side in Britain while he retrospectively slags off my driving skills. I smile and nod. He gets embarrassed. No, I didn't let him crash. I was desperate for that car. I was working with a German in Wales, and we had a business car we could both drive. The guy for one reason or another hated my driving. I was a slightly inexperienced but decent driver, really I was. The guy was just really persnickety in general. Used to actually get irate if I said pardon me when I burped in front of him. What's the point, it's just us. This attitude wasn't helped by the fact he served as a driver in Afghanistan, was older than me, and had left home at 14 to go to a cook academy. So let's just say he felt authoritative, when in fact I was the senior partner. Well, of course he was still getting used to driving on the other side of the road, being German. On an occasion he was driving, he pulls out and decided to distract himself, of all things, by bemoaning my driving. What he hadn't noticed, as you might guess, he was driving on the wrong side. So I just smiled and nodded. I never really took his bull anyway, and let him drive his superior as down the road. Now I mentioned Wales, and thus this was long country road with good visibility, so wasn't worried. Eventually a tractor comes round a bend down the way and he realizes. Of course, only to berate me on how dangerous that was. Smugness accomplished. This wasn't the last major driving error he made, and I never did anything as bad, but there ya go. This all makes him sound real bad, but he was a cool guy when he wasn't being pedantic. Canadian born Chinese, no Chinese, French, or East Coast accent, and I used to live and work in China about 20 years ago, and I got a job as a bookkeeper for an American business organization, business memberships, contact lists, consultation, and surveys of foreign companies. The front desk reception, what the other North American expats had termed as the so-called Joe jobs. Well, good luck, because they had the translation skills, and could read and write in Chinese, had the locals manning them. I had crap putang Chinese skills then. Dave the local needed to hit the washroom and ask me if I was doing anything and if I could man the desk. Sure, no problem. A couple of minutes pass and in walks a couple of nicely suited Americans fresh off the airplane with hours and never been in a foreign country before, written all over their faces, and the one guy starts off with, "Any may I please purchase, I mean buy, information, book, on, company, study, no, survey, of, salaries, newest?" I'm thinking, geez, really? I'm not deaf and this just sounds like I was back in grade 2 with the syllables being sounded out. I say, hang on. Now we had a no strict talk across the office rule, but the hell I cared at this point in time. I lean back the chair, looking into one of the side offices for the local girl who dealt with selling the surveys. "Linda? Hey Linda, got a minute? A gentleman is here wanting to buy the 1996 survey of foreign companies. Has we got the latest printing available yet?" "Yes," I said. "Has we?" A mildly accented voice replies back, 1997 second quarter being printed and binding now and arriving end of week. We have maybe dozen 1996 last quarter still left. Thanks. Can you take this one for me? Linda was responsible of those very expensive books under lock and key, and she was the one of the few who could cut a handwritten receipt too. 1 minute please. I'm finishing database update. Turnaround high. Would the 1996 end of year survey be okay? The 1997 is coming out later on in the week. I'm not sure if there is a new price, but I can lock the price for you for the 1996 and make a note to send you the 1997 if you pay now and are leaving town. We arrange overseas delivery to you via FedEx and all you need to do is leave a forwarding address. Through the glass door, I see Dave coming back from the washroom. You know what? I'll let you think about it for a bit. Linda'll be right out, and she can tell you more about the survey if you require more information. These guys were standing there slack-jawed. They bought the 1996 survey and left. Linda stopped in my office, handed me the receipt, and asked me why I was laughing so hard that I couldn't breathe. I have a ton of these. First one happened to me my first day as a pizza delivery driver. I was young, dumb, and naive. The store manager told me that something was wrong with the pizza dough and that it wasn't raising like it should. He sent me across the street to a grocery store to get a dough patch kit from the bakery department. So being a good employee and knowing absolutely nothing about baking, I complied. Of course, there is no such thing as a dough patch kit, and when I asked the employee working in the bakery, they must have been in on the joke and told me they were currently out, but that the store across town had them in stock. I then proceeded to drive across town to the other grocery store. The employees there just laughed when I asked for the kit and told me there is no such thing and that I was being pranked. I didn't really care because I was on the clock and getting paid to drive around. The same manager had another new employee wax the outside of the store dumpster with turtle wax, saying that the garbage service wouldn't pick up the trash if the dumpster wasn't clean and shiny. She believed him and spent a good part of the afternoon applying a coat of wax to the dumpster before he finally told her that it was only a joke. I could have stopped it and told her before she started the wax job, but I didn't. She didn't work at the store for long after that. I also have many from my days in the army as a signals intelligence analyst. In 8 feet. Devons, our barracks was on a quad which was surrounded by barracks from each branch of the armed services. When new privates arrived straight out of basic training, we would tell them that the special forces were conducting a training mission that evening and were going to do a night rappel out of helicopters into the quad. We would then give them each 2 flashlights with instructions showing different signals they need to perform with the flashlights to help navigate the helicopters, and then send them out into the middle of the quad to perform the signals. All of the service members from the different barracks would file out and watch as the new recruits swung the flashlights about in different formations waiting for helicopters that never arrived. Part of my job involved many long hours of boredom, especially during the night working shift work. We came up with many pranks to help fight this boredom, but this was my favorite. At the end of night shifts, we would send new recruits out to each station to receive the EMHO, early morning hard-on, report. Part of our job was intercepting signals and measuring different parameters of them. The report consisted of questions that they had to ask the operator of each station. For example, when did it come up? How long was it up? What is the frequency of it? I could go on, but this post is long enough. When I was an LDS missionary, Mormon, I had this one companion who was a complete scumbag of a human being. On top of breaking all the missionary rules, which there are many, he was a smelly slob who secretly knocked up a 16-year-old girl in the church bathroom. He was much older and stole a bunch of stuff from everyone. He definitely shouldn't have been a missionary at all. I was a very timid guy at the time and I didn't know about most of the stuff he did, so I never reported him. It was absolute misery living with the guy and even worse trying to preach a religion with him that he didn't care about at all. In the home we lived in we had a pull-up bar. It was the kind where you unscrew the ends of the bar to lengthen it until it fit very tightly into the door frame. No one really used it, so I decided to give it a good tug to see if it could actually hold a person up. After a few really hard tugs, it came loose. I realized that it had to be put perfectly perpendicular to the frame or else it would slip out again. I put it back at about an 89-degree angle, so slightly off that I thought it wouldn't make a difference. A few weeks passed by, and I had completely forgotten about the bar. Living with the scumbag missionary only got worse. One day, he comes up to my study desk and starts bragging to me about having sex with the 16-year-old girl. Feeling awkward, I changed the topic to exercising and how many pull-ups he could do. As he reluctantly hung on the bar, he was a really fat kid. I realized I didn't fix the bar. I egged him on anyway. As he struggled to get his chin above the bar, his eyes turned terrifyingly wide as the bar slipped. His head and back slammed on the marble floor. He had a huge lump on his head and had back pains. A few days later he shamefully got sent home because people finally found out about all the crap he did. Sweet karma.